Hello, and welcome to the fourth and final event for the Spirituality as Land Stories and Relations series. Today we welcome Louise Bernice Halfe, whose Cree name is Sky Dancer. The theme for this evening's event is Indigenous spirituality in poetry. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional owners and knowledge keepers of the unceded Indigenous lands on which Concordia University is located. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters that we now call Montreal. Montreal is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. My name is Christine Jameson. I'm a member of the Boothroyd First Nation, which is part of the Naklukma Nation in the Fraser Canyon in British Columbia. I'm a professor in the Department of Theological Studies here at Concordia University. The Department of Theological Studies is hosting this series of events, which is made possible by our Dean and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences Special Projects and Events Fund. The fund supports activities like these, where we have the opportunity to listen to and encounter Indigenous artists and scholars, deepening our understanding of Indigenous spirituality. I just want to now say a few words about housekeeping. This evening's event is being recorded. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the interview. At the end of the event, and the event is actually going to be interview style with Dr. Matthew Anderson interviewing Louise Halfe. So please post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try our best to make sure all the questions can be asked. Now I'd like to welcome Dr. Catherine Kinoesqueo Richardson. Dr. Richardson is Director of First People Studies in the School of Community and Public Affairs here at Concordia, and co-founder of the Center for Response-Based Practice. We are fortunate to have Dr. Richardson join us today to introduce our speaker. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. Tansi nito tamtak, Nitsigasan, Catherine Richardson, Ekwa Kinoesqueo. I'm delighted to be here and to be invited to introduce our guest speaker and poet tonight, Louise Bernice Halfe. So thank you, Christine, for the invitation, and I'm happy to be representing First People Studies and to be involved with these kinds of events. It's just great. So let me introduce our honored guest tonight. Louise Bernice Halfe was born in Two Hills, Alberta. Her Nehiyao Cree name is Sky Dancer. She was raised on the Saddle Lake Indian Reserve and attended Blue Quills Residential School. Halfe's first published poetry appeared in Writing the Circle, Women of Western Canada. She has since published 4 collections, Bare Bones and Feathers, and that's bear as in the animal, and the 1994 winner of the Canadian People's Poet Award, and finalist for the Spirit of Saskatchewan Award. Blue Marrow, 1998, was the finalist for the Governor General's Award for Poetry, the Lowther Award, and Saskatchewan Book of the Year Award. The Crooked Good in 2007, and her most recent collection, Burning in This Midnight Dream in 2016, was the winner of 3 Saskatchewan Book Awards and the League of Canadian Poets Raymond Souster Award. Halfe has served as Poet Laureate of Saskatchewan and is widely recognized for weaving Cree language and teachings into her works. A collection of Halfe's work, Sokeita, containing poems written across the expanse of her career, was published by Wilfrid Laurier Press in 2018. Halfe has a Bachelor of Social Work degree and received an honorary Doctorate of Letters, PhD, from Wilfrid Laurier University in 2012, the University of Saskatchewan in 2019, and Mount Royal University 2021. Congratulations. In September 2020, she received the 2020 Cheryl and Henry Kloppenberg Award for Literary Excellence, which honors a Saskatchewan writer who has written a substantial body of acclaimed literary work and has had a significant impact on writing in Saskatchewan. Certainly, these credentials are very impressive, and I look forward to hearing Louise tonight. So hi, thank you very much.
Danse Louise, welcome. Tawao, I hope that you're there. Oh, there you are. It's nice, so nice to see you, and thank you for joining us this evening at Concordia. I was so pleased when you accepted our invitation, Christine, and my invitation to join us, because you and I know each other from walking on that land, on the Treaty 4 plains, and I love your poetry, and it's just so nice to be able to talk a little bit about it. So I firstly welcome, and I wonder, I think the best way to start is with your words. Would you be able to maybe start us with a poem? You have to unmute first.
I want to say hello to everybody and thank you for having me back. Our last Montreal Concordia gathering was really wonderful. I loved being there and, you know, seeing my son and being with you folks. Newatski siga magani mitok sinian sigason sadly ko tsika ka pe tutean e ko mi waitin e ben to into e ben to mi ko ta ka pe pixkoyan. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and my Cree name is Newatski siga mogani gani mitot, which means loosely translated into English is sky dancer. And interestingly, I received that name from my elder after my first vision quest. And I just want, because we're talking about spirituality in poetry, I have to address that namesake. And that namesake is actually means the 4 levels of the heavens. And when the elder gave it to me, he said there'd be philosophy, psychology, and the writing career, of course, and I forget what else, but so that name is loaded. I was named after the Northern Lights, and in our community, we believe that the Northern Lights are our spiritual ancestors, and we are from the stars after all, and even scientists claim we are stardust. So that was interesting for me. I thought, well, I could have told you that. We knew that all along. Anyway, so it's wonderful to be here, and yeah, so that was many, many years ago that I received that namesake, and the elder predicted my journey as a writer. And the first things he said to me after one of I've done many, many fasting ceremonies with him before he passed away. And he said 3 simple words to me, 3 simple short sentences. He said, strong wings, strong back, big wings, travels far. Those 3 sentences, which have evolved in my writing career. My writing has taken me all across the country, into the States, and across Europe and China and Asia. And I've been all over the place as a writer, and I've been really blessed that way. So I'm really grateful for that elder and for my spirit guides that continue to surface through my work. So what I want to do is read this first poem, and it's called Walkabout. Ba-mute win. I gotta get it right. Walkabout. Oasis belonged to the universe, but he didn't know that. For centuries, he looked for belly button. He walked the forest where he tripped on the tree's umbilical cord. Still, he did not see. His moccasins had a tiny hole at his sole where he felt the soft earth. The fire roared, yet he didn't know the sun rose from the underground of his belly. The river lived stone-ribbed throughout him. The ancestral wind spoke, he did not hear. He wondered why his heart ached when he looked at the night heavens. Oasis didn't know his name always moved ahead of him, and he was the shadow following. That was the first poem.
Thank you, Louise. Maybe I'll just pick up right straight from that poem. And I will say, by the way, you introduced your name and you said what the name stands for. And I see on the cover of that book that Dr. Richardson talked about as well, that's the Northern Lights, the Dancing Lights. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked about Oasis, and Oasis means child, I guess. And in your book, you say, you just mentioned it, you said, Oasis, who am I without you? Which is what the narrator says, what you say at one point. I just loves him, that Oasis. And the name of the collection that's going to come out is in 2021 with Brick Books is Oasis, Kinky and Disheveled. So that's the collection. Who is Oasis? Who is child for you? That's, I guess, my first question.
Oasis is a character that I made up for this particular poetry. But Oasis, although it translates and people understand it to mean little child, it actually means the enlightened being. And in this particular works, I chose the Oasis, the child that is within all of us, that comes out in play and gets into all kinds of trouble, and humorous stuff happens to him and or her. And that's the Oasis that I'm talking about. And actually, the collection is not only my own imaginative work, but it's also a collection of other people's short stories that Oasis has adopted and narrated in her own way. And because I asked people, what was the funniest thing that ever happened to you? It was really interesting because Native people had no problem relating to that question. White people, on the other hand, really had to think about the funniest thing that happened to them. It's like, where's your sense of humor, folks?
Do you want to say anything more about there's a lot of laughter in this book. There is an awful lot of laughter and gut-splitting laughter sometimes. And do you want to say anything about the place of laughter in Nahiao society and in Indigenous society in general?
In our community, we laugh at ourselves a lot. We make up exaggerated stories of the events that have happened to us directly or happened to somebody else. Sometimes there's a real competition in our communities to see who can stretch the story the longest and the furthest and exaggerate it. But laughter is a healer. It's one of our medicines. It raises our endorphins and makes us feel good. And what's interesting also, of course, is when people are in deep stages of grieving, they laugh. It's an interesting reaction, and I'm not sure I entirely understand what that's about. Maybe there's such a release of grief, and they don't know how to handle it. I don't know, but it's present in very much in people's lives.
You talked about how some of the Oasis stories are almost short stories or things that you've picked up. What can you tell me? Would you call yourself? I mean, I certainly think of you when I read these stories, and from knowing you, I think of you as an otachimo. I don't know if that's the right word, but a storyteller. And how are you a storyteller, and how do you take on being a storyteller using the Awasa stories?
Yeah, Otatsumu means, it's an interesting word again. Otatsumu means the person who releases or tells the story from the here and now. And it has also connotations to Otatsumu, which means here and now I crawl along with my stories, something like that. I'm not sure if I'm accurate. Sometimes I read into too much of the language, and I have to double check with the fluent Cree speakers, and I actually invigorate other Cree speakers to start thinking about the meaning to some of our words and how we've interconnected words that have many, many meanings. For example, there's a word in Cree that says something about I can't think of it offhand, but something about picking words out in the air because we're fragmented and we're putting them together. Yeah.
Is that what you do as a poet? Do you pick the words out of the air?
Sometimes, yeah, I do. And sometimes I eavesdrop. I'm a thief.
well, now crows are notorious thieves, aren't they?
Yes, yeah.
And you certainly have crows sometimes showing up in and other animals. So tell me about the animals who play such a role, who are sometimes who have voices sometimes, and other times they have agency and do things in the poems. Tell me about the many different beings who inhabit your poetry.
Yeah. Awasas is a shapeshifter, and what I always find interesting is that we make metaphorical language when we're describing people, like, isn't he sly like a fox? He's such a weasel. What's he crowing about? Stuff like we're always using this language. And in fact, I mean, we're animals, right? We're animals. And people forget to honor that part of ourselves. And we are what we eat. We eat, deer, moose, chickens, cows, pigs, I mean, we are those beings. We actually inhabit them with it, not only their soul beings, but their physicality. And I might even have the horns of a buffalo or something like that, to give you a little jab and go, get with it, so it's, yeah. And, Hollywood does this in terms of Big Bird, the Road Runner. They personify animals into human beings. And where do they get that from, for crying out loud? I don't know, but they must sort of understand that we are animals and we are spiritual entities that inhabit, is that the right word? All of these beings, yeah.
One of the lines in one of your poems that I really loved was that you said something about being a nighttime dreamer, a daydreamer, and a visioner. And then there was a line that I really liked. You said, or maybe an owl who could swivel her head and another face would reveal itself. And I wonder if you could tell me something about how this Oasis, this book that's about to come out, and these poems that you're reading tonight, I think we should have another one right after this, is another face of the owl from some of the poetry that you've written in the past.
Yeah, I think so, because we have a lot of faces, right? We have our professional face, we have our poetic creative face, we have our relationship face, we have our children's face for our kids and for our grandchildren. We wear all kinds of different hats to suit the situation. And the owl is sometimes perceived as a harbinger in some cultures, I don't see it as such. I think it's wise, and I've been told when it arrives to the home that it's bringing good news, it's bringing news. And so in some respects, I suppose the owl is a different kind of cover story where it has the capacity to swivel its head and look in all directions before it hones in on an object. I don't know if that's made sense to the text, but yeah.
Would you give us another one of your poems now? That would be lovely.
Sure. This one that I chose, English is not the first word. Okay. Awas has made many words, mixing them up, but folks seem to understand. She got her claws pedicured at a high-end salon. The beauty lady pointed to a chair and told her to sit down. She lifted her hind leg and adjusted her tail. The beauty lady squealed, and here was Oasis stimulated by this invitation. In her broken England, whoops, see, I warned you, English, she once told a crowd of engineers, eager beavers, she was a retarded veteran. In her lumberjack days, she'd occasionally knock herself out when her buck teeth fell trees. During the holiday celebrations, Oasis would bless everyone and shout, ladies and genitals, peace be with you, and lift her arms in acceleration. One leg used crutches as three legs to get about. She spent the night with Oasis, who promised her a ride to the airport the following morning. To hurry her along as she hopped on her crutches, Oasis told her, hippity hop, hop along, cousin. One leg muttered, blustered. Oasis bowed, all my raisins. In this particular text, peas is spelled P-E-A-S, like the vegetable peas, rather than, peas.
Tell me, in this poem, in this set of a collection, but also in others, you intersperse Cree and English quite a bit, and you play. I mean, one of the great things about this collection for me is how you set up English, and then you kind of poke fun at it. You pervert it. You change it. You shift it around in order to sort of dig into the English. And I'm wondering if the interplay, if you could say something about the interplay between Cree and English in your poetry, which is characteristic of other, of many of your poems and books.
I don't know what to say about that. I have so much fun. There's some words that are not commonly used on everyday language that I felt needed to be preserved or explained. For example, the word penis in my language actually means big gut. So it's an extension of the intestine. It's not the penis itself, it's the extension of the intestine. And we have a story of the Wisageta who has, his intestine is very, very long. Anyway, it's just fun looking at the language and playing with it. And I know some other Cree speakers. Floyd Fable can really speak the language and make poetry in Cree. He's the best person ever that I've heard recite poetry in Cree, and he makes it up on a spot. I haven't been able to do that because although I speak it fluently, my husband is non-native. He's a settler, and so I can't practice my Cree the way I like. But I also love being with the elders who don't have the command of the English language. For example, the chap who told me the story that he called himself a retarded veteran, you know, he meant I'm a retired veteran. And there was another story that that was given to me about a chap asking somebody to put a diagram on the overhead, but instead said, put your diaphragm on the overhead, you know? So I love those stories when they're given to me to play with and to, you know, evolve them in the Owasis stories. And it's great. I mean, I always tell white listeners, what I love about the language, if they can't dissect it and don't understand it, too bad for them, really, because nobody feels sorry for me when I don't understand a word in English. I have to go and research it and ask somebody. So my intent is trying to also build in dialogue for settlers to go to a native speaker, say, hey, do you understand this? And if not, let's find somebody who does, because not everybody speaks Cree, and we're all from different tribes. So that to me is very important.
I like the way you said the story was given to you, and to me, that sounds like you think of stories given to you as gifts.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There's a question that, thank you. There's a question from Christine, from Dr. Jameson. It strikes me that your poetry is a journey you are on, and each poem in each book expresses a certain place you are at when you write it. If that's accurate, would you say it is a healing journey and a spiritual journey that is the writing of all of these books?
Oh, that's an interesting question. My healing journey began when I was in my early 30s, okay? I saw a psychiatrist for a few years. He became my lifelong friend until his death. And then I followed up with a psychologist who also became my lifelong friend and is still a friend to this day. And I went to my elders on my spiritual path, and also to learn about culture and a reclamation of myself, because residential school really took precedence when I was growing up, and I needed to know who I was. And I would not say that my writing has healed me. I healed me by going into therapy. What my writing has allowed me to do is to acknowledge all those other stories that have happened to my community, myself and my family, in a more healthier way, so that I can convey to the public the necessity of acknowledging them in story form, because the story form is a type of medicine that opens the door for us to look into our psyche. Some people have said to me, don't you feel responsible for people's reactions to your work? And I say, nope, I don't. I'm glad they're reacting. Nobody held my hand when I went through, when I saw Jesus Christ Superstar or The Exorcist, which totally terrified me. Nobody holds my hand when I go to a symphony in the movie, and the symphony is the music is so livid. Livid? No. What? That's not the right word. It's so real and so powerful, it makes me cry. Art moves people, and we are there to understand our own process within that art. We, like, you know, I had a glimpse of Christine's paintings, and I can go into that art and define it for myself of how peaceful that looks, you know, and be comfortable within that space, and drink in that atmosphere in her painting. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask you about you talked about Owasis and being male and female. And one of the great things about the collection is that you flip back and forth, you know, sometimes using he, sometimes she. And I think, like so many other poems in this collection, you play with that and use that in some way. And it's because in Cree, those pronouns don't exist in quite the same way. Do you want to, what do you want readers to take away about masculinity and femininity from the way that you play with the gender when you're talking about Awasis?
I'm not sure if I thought about that in terms of the masculinity or the femininity, because there's no pronouns in my language, and for a long time I spoke with when I would talk with you, for example, I would maybe address you as a her and a she, even though you're male, because it made no difference to me. There's no gender word. We have napeo, which means man, Israel, which means fire woman. But to say when we're addressing somebody, we'll say, well, he went to the store with him, it might be a her, and they went to pick up some cigarettes or whatever. So I'm playing with the language and introducing a concept that people haven't thought about in a long while. And I used to speak like that, me. That's how I used to speak, me, because, and my late brother would tell me, you don't need to speak like that. I say, well, what are you talking about? Me is me. I'm speaking for myself, me, because I didn't understand the concept of the English language. But femininity and masculinity, well, there was, we're born, my understanding is we're born, what is it we're born? My aging just drives me crazy. Oh man. Anyway,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know, do you want to say anything more about masculinity and femininity, or would you prefer to go straight to another poem? Oh, did you hear me?
Yeah. I can go to another poem. I'm just gonna okay, I'll call this Blame the Little People. Mimi, we see what. Now, when I read it in English, I can hardly say it in my Cree, but it's about little people. Mimi Gwesisak. Now that's the word. Mimi Gwesisak. I can't look at it because it just screws me up. Little man always lost her glasses. It's a wonder she didn't lose his mind. Little man lost his glasses along the fence. Oasis and little man's search, upturning summer and autumn grass. Oasis was startled when a garter snake slithered in his path. There lay the glasses. Another time, little man lost her wedding band. It had been lying on the altar in front of the sweat lodge. Several years later, long after they left the site of the lodge, Oasis went over the flattened altar with a friend who had once made her heart turn green. They became friends when the wounds they had both inflicted mended. There in the grass patch, the wedding band shone. One day, little man lost her wallet. For weeks, he dug in all his pockets, her coat, his drawers, her bag, and made phone calls to the drugstore, the cafe, the gas station. One day, when she was finished snow blowing the sidewalk, he returned to find the wallet waiting.
That line, they became friends when the wounds they had healed had become mended. What does that mean? That sounds beautiful, and it sounds so much like life. But
it is life. Sometimes we have falling out with friends for whatever, and in this case, the story given to me was that this woman made a pass at the other woman's husband, and they're of different tribal affiliations. She's white, she's Native, and the Native woman addresses the white woman about this transgression. Transgression, is that the right word? And they have a big blowout about it. But the friendship is repaired after much talk, and yeah, so that's what that poem is about.
And the wedding ring is found on the driveway with the snowblower.
No, the wallet is found.
Oh, sorry, the wallet is found.
No, the wedding ring. The wedding ring is found on the old lodge.
Lodge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me something about the place of so you have sweat lodges and you have willow shelters made of willows in your poetry, and places that to me I can see in a coulee on the prairies or other places. Can you say something about when you close your eyes and you think about these poems, what do you see? What are the places that you see?
When I'm writing about the sweat lodge per se?
The sweat lodge, or maybe the willow, the willow shelter. What do you see?
You know, one time we were my husband and I have a sweat lodge that was handed down to us from our elder from after many years of fasting and ceremony. And one time we went and cut willows, and we lined the willows up on the ground in our tarps, and we thought, well, we'll look after it tomorrow morning. That night, I dreamt that the willows were crying and the tarps were crying, and they wanted to be lifted up immediately. So that was a lesson for me. So when I see willows are medicine. And not only do we collect the willow for aspirin, it's a painkiller, and for tobacco as well. We make tobacco kinnikinnick out of the willow. I can't help but I won't diminish their properties. They're a medicine. And we also use the willow, a little willow branch, when we're moving from, like when I leave here from my daughter's home or when I'm leaving a hotel room, I call my spirit out. But when I'm leaving a house that I've occupied for years and years, I will take a willow branch the way my mother taught me and whip the air and call every individual of my children and myself, my husband, and call our spirit out. So we're always leaving with our spirit. So that willow is always paying attention to its service to us and our commitment to it. It is also a willow that can be used for disciplining children where they need to get a little spanking. I mean, that would be considered violent these days, but I believe in corporal punishment to a point, right? Yeah, so, even when my husband and I are traveling and we see a pile of rocks, we look at them, oh, the grandfathers, that would be a good sweat, So it's incorporated in our being.
I love hearing that it's incorporated in your being. So to what extent is a sweat a regular thing for you? It's quite regular, isn't it?
For us, it's a regular thing. It's a commitment. We have to keep it alive, pass it on to as much as we can for those people who are interested. It's an open service to anybody. We've had Black people, Chinese people, Indian people from India. We've had Muslims in our lodges and all kinds of tribal affiliations in our lodges. We've had all kinds of white people. It doesn't matter what professional background they are. Once you get in your trunks and in your bare essentials, it doesn't matter about the hierarchy.
Maybe it's time. I want to make sure that people have a chance to hear your poetry. So if you could read another poem for us, that would be great.
How much time do we have, Matthew? Because I can cut down the poetry and just choose.
Oh, no, there's lots of time. Please.
What's love got to do with it? Oasis tried to harden her heart for the enchantment that pushed her way into her sun-filled hovel. She often turned up when Oasis was least prepared to see him. Oasis saw Steal My Heart once as he pumped her aged thighs uphill, striding in his jocks. When she lifted her head, their stars collided and the rattlesnake struck. How many different moons did Oasis wrestle with Steal My Heart? She was a slug that clung to his leg after a slough swim.
No, I have swum in sloughs, and you have, but not everybody who's here probably tonight has. So I want to ask you about land and specific land, because you also had a poem where you talked about Oasis's moccasins had a tiny hole at the sole where he felt the soft earth. And I thought, isn't that you? You like to feel the earth a bit, I think, don't you? And so what is the connection to, in your poetry, between the creativity and a specific place or land, and the earth, like that connection to the earth? Is there a spirit in the earth that gives you the gift of the words sometimes, or the location or the place, the image?
The two images, let's talk about that first. The two images, the moccasin with the hole is actually very symbolic. When my children were born, and I was taught this, we make a little tiny hole on their first pair of moccasins, so they're always and forever connected to the earth. And it's also a symbol of where the umbilical cord is connected. And the slough slug, the snail or the bloodsucker on your leg, right, so to speak, is metaphor of the obsessions that we carry a lot around sometimes. Okay, they suck the blood out of us, and they try to sway us into a different place. But yeah, the earth is and I'm having this discussion with a PhD student right now, because she's wondering where it will go. Nigawinanaski comes from. Why was the earth mother referred to as a woman, as a female entity, and she wondered if that has always been the case, or if it's a new term applied to if it's a new Cree term applied to the earth. I think because I think it's always been female, the earth, and because everything on this earth is produced by her. We dig her up, we rape the hell out of her to take all this gold, this diamond, that little diamond that I'm wearing, these glasses that are made of sand, right? Everything is from the earth. She is so giving, and maybe the term Nigawinanaski has not always been there, but she has been definitely female. And for me, all of life is a breathing entity. It is filled with spirit. And I know this from my own spiritual awareness and my vision quests, that I've been gifted to hear her. I mean, literally, I've been gifted to feel the rock move under me and say, "Oh, it's you," when I was camping on top of her. I've heard the wind scream at me and say, "It's time to get up." And when I've been fasting, I've had the water say to me, "And where are you going?" And it involves a really intense space of listening that I don't often do these days, because I'm too busy listening to other noises. But it doesn't even necessarily mean you're meditating all the time. like what I take daily walks on our land in Saskatchewan, and I'm listening all the time, listening, saying, and I don't know what I'm absorbing all the time right away, but when I go back and I write about it, I'm going, that's what it was saying, yeah.
You said earlier that you eavesdrop on people's conversations a lot. Maybe you're eavesdropping on the earth sometimes too.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
There's a question that came in also. The words and poems come to you as gifts. Who is the giver? Your spirit guides? How do you understand these gifts that you receive of the words and the poems?
That's an interesting question. I think, can you, I think, we can't take it for granted, and we do, that thought and language are just plucked out of thin air. There is a spirit in all of us, a God figure that lives in all of us, that is in constant motion and in contact with all of us. And it's a gift. It really is a gracious gift that this creator has allowed us to experience her within. Have I answered that question? I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. I was looking at another question and thinking that I maybe would ask that one on too. If somebody has written, can you speak about the time we're in and how our relations to, and I'm not sure if I pronounce it properly, Akachkusak, or the stars, can support us during these winter months ahead?
Winter is, I'll take the bear, for example. Winter in a bear is a time for hibernation. When we're in hibernation, like the bear, we're living off the fat of our knowledge. And, we're living off everything that we've accumulated this last year, the years a bit after us. And we're looking at that fat. And that fat is what prepares us for the journey ahead. How we use it is up to us. We can go into a deep depression. And, and a few weeks ago was the first time I felt really angry with COVID. And I went into a slight depression because I couldn't interact with anybody, person to person. I miss my daughter, I miss my son, I miss my grandkids, and I can't travel to go see them. They're all living very far away. And I just wanted to live normally, so to speak, you know what I mean? And I wanted to go out and camp and tent, all those beautiful things that we do. And so I really had to look at that. Why am I so angry at COVID? COVID, I think, is my elders have said, it's a time for reflection. It's a real, like, we're all running around with our masks and our sanitizers. Why? Frankly, we don't want to die. Death is just a doorstep away. We can end up with all kinds of side effects if we're hit with COVID. That's the part I don't want. Death, it's always there. It's right here, sitting right there. And I think we have to take the time out to be reflective, to allow our creative self and to really listen to the moon cycle. The moon cycle is always in sync with us for our creativity. And that's another thing that we've ignored.
I think there would be a lot of people who would be upset with me if I didn't ask you again to read another poem now.
Oh, okay. This is called Darkness. Am I on now? The darkness. Here comes falls down. Thundercloud following. Get over it, Awasis thought. She wasn't known to feel sorry for others. When a friend of hers was crying at the podium, she yelled, "Oh, for F's sake." Falls down tilted her chest forward so Oasis could get a one-eyed man's view of her man-traps. She knew she would strike with an axe and throw bows and arrows right to the heart. The bumpy valley was a distraction from the rolling thunder that followed Falls Down. Falls Down asked Oasis to medicine him and remove the dark clouds that weighed through her fingers and smeared the walls of his pages. Falls Down wasn't pleased that Turd accompanied her wayward travels. Falls Down wanted Broken Eye to laugh with the big heavens of his soul. Oasis uproots a tree and unrolls the mud and roots as if it were a scroll. She unwraps a prayer cloth, tiny bones, sweet carrot root, and bitter medicine. A stone with one large eye roll into view. Oasis spoons owl broth into Falls Down, and he slurps. Laughter threw up dark rumble, who releases the lost teeth of Falls Down. Oasis blows his wings into Falls Down's big eye, into her nose and throat. Wind brings the fawn, colts, the moose calves, and bear cubs, bursts them into being.
I love that. Thank you. Maybe I'll ask you a question about that specific poem. Your writing over the years has been recognized, and you've been given many, many honors, as Dr. Richardson pointed out at the beginning in the introduction, for your poetry. And it's full of, especially this collection is full of kind of body humor and real physicality. And I like that term, you uproot trees and unroll the mud and roots as if they were a scroll, which is just a gorgeous image and one of so many in the book. Many people, especially speaking as a settler, many people see spirituality as separate from and even divorced from body and earth. You know, it's sort of a rarefied spirit thing sometimes for some people. And yet your poems are so full of earth and the body and death right on the shoulder, like you said. So for you, does your vivid poetry show a different kind of spirituality from that kind of, you know, essentialized, off somewhere else spirit? What do you think?
You know, it's sad when people talk about they're atheists. I have a hard time with that concept, and I want to take a pillow and smother them and say, okay, if you're an atheist, let's cut the wind out of you. And I say, if you're an atheist, let's burn your feet a little bit with fire. And if you're an atheist, let's drown you in a tub. And if you're an atheist, let's take a mudslide and smother your nose. Because, and I say this because all of those elements are spiritual entities, every single one of them. And what I find interesting is the Catholics and these other denominations talk about Jesus Christ talking to the rock, making a Bible or whatever, the 10 Commandments in the rock. I don't understand. I used to be a Catholic, but that was ages ago. Jesus Christ talked to the fire, he talked to the wind, and he talked to the water. I mean, if that's the case, what's up with that? And the other thing that I always find interesting is that the angels have wings and they have human form. How come there's wings on human forms? Isn't that a strange concept? You know, and that floors me, this idea of being an atheist when you look up in the galaxy and you see the infinity of something so profound that you can't see the end of it. I think, how can I be an atheist?
And from your poem, what about when you, as you have, because we were there looking at it together, a moose on the prairie? Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to see the moose on the prairie, and there was a moose in the wind in your poem just now. Is that a spiritual thing as well?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and with the rock and the tree upturning the tree, and that we have ceremonies of I don't want to give away a whole lot because it's you've got to earn these ways, but our birthing begins beneath a tree. Often you will see artists that make the tree a feminine tree with family. We talk about the family tree, the genogram, we talk about all these roots, and we're talking about being rooted to the earth, so without giving away the ceremony, we have to think about that concept of our connection to the tree of life. I'll leave it at that.
Do you have another poem you could read for us?
Yeah, here's Church. Okay, it's called Church. There were preachers who came to the house with their Jesus in biblical tongues. Awasa served tea and bannock, and then when they were done preaching, told them it was his turn to share his elders' teachings. Out came her drum, his chant rippled from his chest, out came the sweetgrass. They stumbled down the stairs in their hurry to run from this devil worshiper. Oasis rolled on belly woman, laughing, laughing, laughing. Laughter said this was good medicine, and laughter laughed again. Lightning bug woman swirled, jumped in his little lanterns. The sweat lodge became a light shining through. Still, Oasis shook her fat belly. His little face glistened with bare fat. Rattle sung into the willows, sung into the rocks. Lightning bug flew into the air, landed on little wound. Oasis, old moxoned, opened her mouth, and the medicine of laughter, tears, hollering, dancing, and shouting came the sunburst of dawn, where the red robe sky spread and hoisted the heart.
Yeah, thank you for hoisting the heart there. The drum, the chant, the sweetgrass in that poem. There's not as much in this collection. There's not as much about the residential schools and about the Christian missionaries, but do you want to say anything about the contrast between the drum and the chant and the sweetgrass and I don't know, the crucifix and the matins and anything?
The sweetgrass is an incense that we take to not only shield our spiritual self, but to cleanse it and to cleanse our being. It's like when I hate doing these comparisons, but the Catholic Church does this with their incense, right? I don't know what that means, to be frank. I don't know if it's a blessing or whatever, unfortunately, there's a lot of cultural appropriation with the church now, trying to win us back into their system with our sweetgrass and the drumming and the singing. And I really resent that. How would they feel like if I took their crucifix and their Eucharist and started just giving it away at random? A lot of people handle these people that knock on our doors and want to proselytize to us their religious beliefs. I have difficulty with that because it's been shoved down our throat with residential school. Some of my peers have dealt with these people knocking at their doors in very different ways. One woman deliberately answers the door naked. I've actually told some of the Bible thumpers that have arrived at my doorstep saying, not one step further. There's the road, see you, So it's, we're tired of it. We've got our own, thank you very much. We've got our own identity, our own culture, and it's filled with spirituality.
This collection has a lot less overt reference to the residential schools and than some of the past collections. You intended that, I guess. You were going a different direction with this collection?
Yes, yeah. I wanted to be lighter. I wanted to, and I think I'm not done yet. I want to bring the humor out in the open, because we do have a lot of painful stories, and there's lots and lots of painful stories I could write about that I hear about that have been given to me, and but I want to move on as well. I want people to appreciate that we're not stoic and we're not always wounded. Even in our woundedness, we can laugh. And we do have a sense of humor that's outrageous at times, but I love it. Yeah.
I can definitely say from reading some of those poems that it's just lovely poetry, which sometimes is a little crazy and outrageous in this collection, and fun for it. There's some questions here that I'll pass on from participants. And one of them is maybe related to all my relations in that poem, but it says, for Christians to transcend, one must follow the path of God. For Indigenous people, is there something like the 10 Commandments or something like that to follow? In other words, how do you deal with relations between people, I think?
Okay. Yeah, there are 10 Commandments. Respect, kindness, humbleness, love, sharing, discipline, and we call we call them the grandmothers and the grandfathers, because we all have that capacity to practice those morals and values. And I forget the other one. So, but they're very and that is our, I don't want to call it a Bible because we don't have a Bible, but that's our foothold.
Teachings, yeah.
Yeah.
The person says miigwech. So, oh, I may have frozen. The person was asking, what does a red sky mean to you?
Red sky, oh my goodness. I mean, recently, and I've been thinking a lot about this, we've seen a lot of red sky, right? Because of the fires in California and different parts of the world. And I don't know, I love the red sky when in its natural glory. I find it very peaceful. It's welcoming, it's full of love, and it's full of hope. But the earth is cleansing itself. It's cleansing itself of us, and it's doing what it naturally should have happened without our interference. Like in my community, way back before things got messed up, they would have burning ceremonies of the land. It would be the fire was guarded so that it didn't destroy a whole lot of land. So because they knew the earth needed to replenish itself. Yeah.
I wonder if you have, we're getting toward the end of our time, but do you have another poem yet there for us?
I've got this last one.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
And it's called tent camping. Okay. Oasis was car camping. She snuggled with little white man in the darkness of their tent, and she was horny. So he laddered her miguan, his drinking spoon. Little White Man had a sniff and asked why the oil had a funny smell. When Oasis brought it to her nose, she discovered it was a clear cedar shampoo. She had marked it as mineral oil. Little White Man laughed and laughed, said she would have come up blowing bubbles.
A lot of humor in this poetry, and that was one of the great things about reading it. It's just so wonderful to read. There is a question about your poetry, and does the person is asking, does your poetry come to you in a rush like the wind, or does it take time?
Sometimes it comes in a rush, and I have to get it down right away, like the wind. And other times it takes its sweet old time, and other times it's an evolution like this when I'm waking up and I'm going, and I just follow it along. And other times I have to coach it along. So it's variable in its approach, and I work at paying attention to it.
There is a question here. Does Oasis know Wasakachak?
Yes, they're brothers or sisters, and there might even be many generations of relatives. Yeah, they know each other.
Do they get along?
Sometimes. They're both tricksters.
I guess I'm not sure if there are other questions. I have one more myself, and I'm just looking to see if there are any others. There's a question about sweat lodges. It's a great question, but I think that's probably better directed to somebody local. I wanted to ask about how you see your own poetry, because there are so many images that, writers, we sometimes, the painters who paint themselves into the corner of a picture somewhere or something like that. And sometimes when reading your poems, I wonder if you maybe painted yourself into your picture just a little bit here or there, where you have, and I wanted to know if your poetry is like a blood river of land-filled brawls, or if your poetry is more like the singing wind whose throat is hollering songs. If you could pick one of those descriptions for your own poetry, how would you describe it?
I think it's both. I mean, obviously from my earlier works, it's a river of, what did I say?
of blood, of land-filled brawls.
Yeah, I think that my earlier poetry definitely was that, and it's found a breeze to sail on now. And I just, there's a lot of issues and topics I could write about, and I've been thinking a lot about different topics. I'd like to address lateral violence in my own community, for example. I'd like to address gender violence with the same gender. I would like to address racism and how it's played out in different ways a little bit more. So yeah, there's just a whole host of things that I let my artesian well accumulate, and I do a lot of research. I let it filter through my being, and I wait till something pops out that really catches my passion, and it becomes an obsession. And that's what happens with my poetry. It becomes an obsession and a passion, and I just go, you know what? It's calling.
There's a question here asking about maybe reading other poets. Do you like to read poems by Richard Wagamese? Oh, not sure if you can hear me. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I love Richard Wagamese's writing, and I'm sorry that he's gone to the spirit world, but I'm sure he's dancing with us. He's a fine writer, and yeah, he's a good man. Yeah.
And another another question, and I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll just say what it is, and then maybe you have the sense of it. And the question is it Indigenous spirituality in poem or poem in Indigenous spirituality?
How can you separate the two? You know?
Yeah.
I don't separate the two.
Maybe we're just about out of time, but I'm going to ask you again about overhearing conversations. And I wanted to know, I guess, a little bit more, this is entirely for me, about how you overhear conversations of the wind and the land and the rocks, the grandfather stones. And if you want to say anything more about how you listen in on those conversations.
I don't know how to articulate that. I think it's so intuitive. It's very intuitive. I don't know how to articulate that, Matthew. It's intuitive. You feel it on your skin, you know, it's, yeah.
I guess I'll just say, can an ask come in? Thank you. And I'm going to bring Christine back in. You've been very gracious with your time and with your words and with your thoughts. And it's just such a pleasure to see you again and to hear your words on the page and spoken to us now. Thank you. That's it. And Christine is coming in.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you, Louise. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. I have to say, I find your poetry takes me, and I think us, to a place, an experience that is something beautiful and startling. There's disturbing elements and provoking elements and enticing elements, and it just makes me aware of the power of words, and especially when the words are spoken. So thank you so much, Louise, for being part of our series this evening. So I'm just going to say a few closing remarks. That this series, Spirituality as Land, Stories, and Relations, was a 4-part event that invited.
Oh, I think you muted yourself, Dr. Jameson.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I don't know if you heard my thank you to Louise. Yeah. So I'll just say it again. So thank you, Louise, for your poetry, for spending this time with us this evening. I find your poetry takes us to a place and an experience that is beautiful and startling. It disturbs us, it entices us, it provokes us. And I'm very struck by the power of words, especially when they are spoken, as they were, as you did tonight. So thank you so much, Louise, for being part of this event. I just want to close now with a couple of remarks that this series, Spirituality as Land, Stories, and Relations, was a 4-part event that invited guests from the worlds of poetry, academia, film, and literature to engage in discussion around a variety of issues related to spirituality and indigeneity. We are so fortunate to have these 4 wonderful guests over the past 6 weeks. And I just want to thank all of them again, and thank the Department of Theological Studies for hosting this event, and for the Faculty of Arts and Sciences for providing funding to help put this on. And in particular, to thank you for participating in the series. And please provide any feedback. We would be so interested to hear what you thought. And we hope to continue doing more events as we move forward into the future. So thank you so much, and good night.